So one of the biggest mistakes that yoga teachers make is I see yoga teachers going to do more yoga training. So one of the curses to our industry, I'll call it this, is the curse of yoga accreditation. Now this is a topic in and of itself, but I'm going to give you a little bit here. The whole thing with yoga accreditation, I'm not going to name any names because there's lots of names out there, and no one is really a bad guy. Everyone is really trying to do their best, but I'm going to just share with you some stuff that maybe you already know, maybe you're kind of aware of, but not the whole picture. I will just share what picture I have with you, and maybe you can relate to this. So what I call the curse of yoga accreditation is, on one side, the yoga accreditation has good intentions, and they have to take this chaotic thing that is just beautiful and wonderful and mysterious and magical that doesn't fit in any box called yoga, and try and fit it in some boxes, right? They have to think about what happens in a yoga training. It's like they have to take this body of knowledge that has been around for so long that doesn't fit in any box and try and categorize it and say, okay, for a yoga school you need to teach all of this, and for a yoga student you need to have all this, so that there's some remnants of that's how we measure quality. And it's really difficult to measure something that is quite subjective, and it's a field that is subjective because it is mysterious, it is magical, there is this element to it. So the curse of the accreditation, or the good thing about the accreditation firstly, is that it's trying to standardize and measure so that you can measure quality and quality of teachers, for example, or quality of yoga schools. So whether you're a yoga practitioner looking for a training or a yoga teacher who's looking for more training, we tend to go, okay, let me see what boxes I can fit into, what measurement is out there. And the curse of the accreditation is this: the 200 hour and the 500 hour. The 200 hour is great because it gets you in the door, it starts to give you a good foundation, hopefully, right, depending on what training you're doing and where you're going. And then the 500 hour normally builds on the 200 hour and gives you more of what you've already learned. Now that's great in one way, but on the other side it's kind of silly, because if you are a yoga teacher and you already learned, right, like the fundamentals of teaching postures, great. Now what? So if you want to build a yoga business and you go and learn more, you've already learned something about postures, and yes, there's so much more to learn. I love postures. But if you're learning more about postures that you've already started to learn, learning more about postures isn't going to give you anything. It's just going to get you more knowledge on teaching postures, and postures are great. I love postures, by the way, right? But more postures when you're trying to set up a yoga business and you're struggling is kind of insane. Like, how does that make sense? So if you've done your first 200 hour, then if I'm in your shoes, then I'd be looking at, and I'm talking to you as a yoga teacher here, if I'm in your shoes, I'd be looking at like, okay, I've got the basic skills. Now, the next part I'll be looking at is getting reps in. When I started teaching, it didn't just fall on my lap. Like, I started teaching, there's a time when I was teaching about 23 classes a week, 23 classes a week. That's about 5 classes a day, generally, right? And that's a lot. For most people, that's just too much. They think, oh my God, I can't do that. I'm not saying you need to do 5 classes, but how many are you teaching a day, a week? Right? Because the more you teach, you're going to improve. Learning more about postures and the technicality is awesome, and there's a time for that, right? The time after you've done a 200 hour to learn more postures is probably not straight away. So that's why a lot of times I'd say to people, don't go and do more training. Right now you need to take what you've learned and fucking apply it. You need to apply what you've learned. You need to get out there and get the reps. You need to be teaching a lot, teaching so much that teaching becomes like the back of your hand. You know it so well, right? And you don't know the back of your hand so well until you look at it so many fucking times that you know all the wrinkles in the back of your hand. Just like that, you need to be teaching so much that you can turn up half asleep to your class and teach it. Your default needs to be your last best, right? That's a whole other thing that I teach in our training. What is your default setting? If your default setting is your worst class that you've done ever because you've not worked on your default, then that is going to be your default. So these are all things that you're going to learn in your craft, that if you are turning up to teach day in, day out, every day, as many times a week, then your skill set is going to grow because you're doing the reps, so to speak, right? And that muscle of teaching is going to grow, because there's elements of teaching that people are going to look for. I'll share with you, as a studio owner or as an ex-studio owner, there are certain elements that I look for when I'm auditioning. So if you're a yoga teacher, you're probably going to auditions. If someone hires you without auditioning you, that to me is crazy, but that's another topic. I hope you're enjoying this video, and if you are considering doing a yoga training soon, click the button below or click the link below to find out more about my upcoming training. I do 2 of them a year and they are life transforming. Back to the video now. So as a yoga studio owner, I would look for certain things, and I'll just give you here the magic sauce, right, from our trainings. Voice, presence, clarity, timing, energy. 5 elements I look for. Voice, presence, clarity, timing, energy. I'll throw another one in, sequence. Most yoga teachers, one of the mistakes they make is they go, oh, I need to be more interesting. So what they do is they go, they look around and they go, right, I know what to do. I'm going to work on sequence, which was the last thing I mentioned. I'm going to work on more fancy, interesting sequences because, and this is the thing that they don't realize, what you are subconsciously or unconsciously saying is, I'm not interesting enough. So I need to make the things outside of me more interesting. And because I'm showing up to a yoga class and, you know, the thing outside of me is the sequence, let me just work on more fancy sequences. Let me just work on more fancy postures. Let me just work on performing postures so that hopefully my students would like me. Wrong place to look. Where you want to be looking is inside. You want to be looking at, why is it that you feel that you need to work on something outside of you? Why do you need to work on more fancy sequences? By the way, sequencing is awesome. It is an art and a science, right? Like, it's something that I'll talk about at some point soon on sequencing. But if you feel like the sequence is the first thing you need to go to, then in my opinion, you're looking at the wrong place. Sequence, fancy sequences, sequencing takes years. It took me years of teaching over and over again, multiple times a day, where then I learned the anatomy and the alignment and looking at all the different bodies and body types and injuries and needs and challenges that people had in class. Literally teaching probably thousands of people on the yoga mat because I did so many reps of teaching. And I'm not saying to show off, but I want to impress upon you what it actually takes. If you're not working on your craft, then you can't expect the results. See, mastery comes from doing something, as you probably heard it 10,000 times, 10,000 hours, 10 years, right? If you're not putting in the reps, you cannot expect results. That's crazy. It's insanity. So same thing with sequencing. If you've just done a training, you just started teaching, and you think, okay, let me just come up with some fancy sequencing because, you know, they didn't teach you any better. Well, here, I'll share it with you. That's the wrong place to look. Where you need to look is internally, inside. You need to look at, why is it that I feel this insecurity that, you know, someone might not like my class? And if someone doesn't like your class, matter of fact, if someone gets up out of your class and leaves from your class, so what? So fucking what? Can you sit with that discomfort of like, shit, someone just left my class? I feel what? What do you feel? And that's where the work is. So if the stuff I'm saying pisses you off right now, I'm not saying to piss you off. I'm saying it because what I learned was, so many times the truth pissed me off first, and then if I stuck with it and actually look at why it pissed me off and did the fucking work, then I would learn, then I would grow. So if you're not looking, if you're looking in the wrong place, then you're going to keep moving the furniture. It's like I'm moving this couch to that side of the room and then that side of the room and then that side of the room, and keep doing it all fucking day long, so much so that I'm exhausted. And most people are exhausted. Yoga teachers are fucking exhausted because you're running around day in, day out to different parts. If you're here in London, it's like it takes you an hour to get this way and that way and that way and that way. And then by the end of it, it's like you run around so much and you've done all this sequencing, you're carrying all the fucking incense and your playlist and this and that. You're trying everything and nothing works. And you keep doing the same thing, not looking at what actually needs to be different. What is it that's not working in your teaching? The first place I would look at is what's going on inside. In any field, and you probably already know this, a lot of people talking about it, 80%, right? In any field, 80% of anything is what's going on inside. It's your mindset, it's your internal world, it's your internal landscape, it's your view of the world, it's your belief systems, your belief structures. It's like, what is actually going on inside? Because the external world, your external world is a reflection of your internal world. And then about 20% or less most of the time is the actual strategy, the technical stuff, you could say in our field, like anatomy, the physiology, the alignment, the postural work, the breath counts, the pacing, the timing, the voice, the presence, the clarity, all those parts. That is the technicality of teaching, like, in our field. And I say our field as in like teaching yoga. I hope you're enjoying this topic. If you would like more, in case you didn't know, Yoga Month, I've been doing a lot of it on my Instagram. Go check out my Instagram page at Dylan Ayaloo, where I'll be covering shorter videos, short form videos, and quick bite-sized chunks of value around yoga or teachings around yoga. If you're working on that, awesome. But if that's all you're working on, you've done a training on that, you're going to train more on that, you're working on the 20%. You're not working on the 80%, which is how you're showing up. Before you open your mouth, you walk into a class, before you open your mouth, you might have had an experience like this as a student, because maybe you were a student at one point. Before the teacher opens their mouth, you already have a feeling of like, yeah, I don't know about this teacher. Or, wow, there's something about this person that I don't know what it is, but I'm interested, I'm curious, I want to learn. And then they start teaching and you're like, wow, okay, there is something about them. So just like that, if you felt it about your teachers, your students are feeling it too. You walk into a room, before you open your mouth, they have a sense of you. How is that? How does someone have a sense of you? It's because we're always communicating, we're always magnifying outwards what's going on internally. So if you're feeling insecure and if you're walking into the room with, I don't know, am I good enough? Am I going to be worthy? Are people going to like me? Are people going to like this class? I don't know, maybe I should just, let me see what I can do outside here. Let me just come up with a better sequence, or let me just stick more incense in the room. Oh, by the way, I love incense. Let me just put on this playlist, and playlists are cool. But if that's all you've got, how about you? You're missing the most powerful part of your class. That feeling of insecurity, that feeling of, I don't know, that stuff is already speaking before you open your mouth, before you teach your fancy poses, before you teach your sequence. So if you're not looking at that, if you're already a yoga teacher, and if you're not looking at that, to me, that is insanity, because that is 80% or more of the work that you should be doing. And so often I see people just ignore that. They just keep and go on and do more of the same thing, the 20% or less. Learn more of that, do more of that. And actually you turn up to a yoga studio or a gym or wherever it is you're teaching and think, okay, I've gone and done more training, right? You're a yoga teacher, you're going to do more training, it costs you money, and then what's the return on that? What's the return on learning more of the same thing? What are you bringing to the table, right? And then the yoga studio doesn't pay you anymore, because frankly, what you might not know as a yoga teacher is that yoga teachers cost a lot to a yoga studio or a gym, right? So if you want to get paid more as a yoga teacher, just like any other industry, you need to think about, what value am I bringing to the table? If you're not bringing more value to the table, more postures could be great, but that might not be the value that the studio or the gym is looking for. So you want to work out what's the value that they need. Let me let you in on a little secret. Maybe one of the things is that you've learned and you've gone and you start teach and you build a community. And let's say you go into a studio with the community, with the following, like a really strong following, because you add so much value to your community that you walk in with a following to a studio. The top studios will fight to keep you because you've got a following. And well, it's no secret, they want your following. They want your community to be there in their studio, right? They want them to come in on the classes, the workshops, the memberships. And if you can bring that to the table, then that's a game changer, because suddenly the conversation is different. You can go above and beyond the hourly rate or whatever it is that they're paying and say, well, how about we talk about a referral fee or something like that, right? So then suddenly, because you're adding value, you're not just some entitled yoga teacher. You're turning up and saying, hey, how can I add value to you guys? And that way they'll be much more inclined to want to fight for you, keep you, right, and support you and help you grow, because you're going to support them first. So these are some of the things that people miss. Like, you know, remember when I had my yoga studio, a lot of yoga teachers turn up entitled, like, oh, I've done a training. So what? Every other man and his dog has done a training. Who cares, right? What have you got to bring to the table? I'll let you another secret. I used to get loads of emails, right, in my inbox as a studio owner. People email me and say, oh, here's my yoga CV. Who cares? Everyone's got a yoga CV. So what? What are you going to bring to the community? What are you going to add to the table? What are you going to bring to the table, right? If you're not adding value, then you're just entitled, expecting something more. So I know these are intense things to say, but it is hitting you. Look, the reason I'm saying it is because not to knock you down, but to say, hey, you can work on it. These are things that you have control of. You can change, right? You can learn, you can grow, and that way you're going to bring more value to the table. So I hope this helps you. I hope this inspires you to actually go and look at the areas that you need to grow on. Maybe you need to learn about business. Maybe you need to learn about your inner game, right? Your internal world, your inner work. And that's where you need to do the work. So if you're looking for that, then I would recommend looking for someone who can actually deliver that, right? Not just people who are, there's a lot of people talking the talk, but are they walking the walk? Have they got like a track record of delivering the transformation that you're looking for? Otherwise, it's just pretty words. Thank you for watching. I hope you've got lots from this video. And if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you'll be first to be notified when I put out my next videos.